Hey everyone, it's Cameron with Car Audio Now again. Today I wanted to give you a quick overview of Axxess's AXDSPL. It's an integrated DSP processor and signal converter that plugs directly into your vehicle's factory wire harness and allows you to configure a ton of things remotely via an app on your phone. I'm in the process of planning out a custom stereo for my 2021 Ford F-150 with the non-B&O, non-amplified system. It has a very nice 12-inch screen and a 7-speaker system, including the tweeters, the center dash channel, and the rear speakers. My plan is to replace all the speakers and add a subwoofer. I'll be amplifying them with an external amplifier or two, and I don't plan on replacing that really nice 12-inch screen with an aftermarket unit and losing out on any of the features that are in this truck. So one of the first things I've been looking into is a simplified way to get signal from my factory head unit to my aftermarket amplifiers without messing up or messing with the unit or losing any of the features of the truck. I also wasn't particularly interested in tapping into the existing wire harness, snipping any wires, summing any signals, etc., etc. I was hoping that there would be a plug-and-play solution. The truck is still so new too that I wasn't sure that anything was on the market. I've used some of Audio Control's products like the LC6i, which their products are powerful and are great, but I was hoping that there was an easier solution from a wiring perspective in particular, and that's when I found the Axxess AXDSPL. So for those of you who are looking to upgrade your stereo with amplifiers, I thought it would be good to give a quick overview of this product. I thought it was pretty powerful, how I plan to use it in my vehicle, and why it's so easy and versatile. This particular unit is going to be used in a 2021 F-150, but they make this unit for a variety of vehicles. So this overview is still very relevant for those who aren't looking to just put this into a Ford. You might have a Chevy, you might have a Honda. So to find out if they make one for your vehicle, go on over to metroonline.com, type in your vehicle information, and see if they make the AXDSP for your car. So in this video, I'm going to pull this out of the box. I'm going to show you the harnesses and where everything plugs into. And then I'm going to hook it up to power via USB to show you the powerful app interface on my phone. I'm not going to put this into the car yet, but I will be able to show you exactly what's in the app interface and how you can have full control over this unit directly on your phone. So let's get into it. And for those of you who like these type of reviews and want to see more, please do us a favor and click the subscribe button on the bottom of the video. All right, so I've done you all a favor. I pulled out all the components from the box here to show you what comes with this unit and also how it hooks up. Axxess has really simplified these types of installations for both professionals but also DIY installers. You can see that with some of the components here. So let's take a look at the kit. Obviously, first things first, you have the manual here on the right. The instructions are very easy to read. They have plenty of diagrams. They walk through the different configurations very well, I have to say. But more importantly, you'll find 4 of the key components here as well. On the left, this large harness here is the main vehicle-specific adapting wire harness. This is what makes the system plug and play into your existing OEM, your factory wire harness without really any wiring. This is also the key component that will change depending on which vehicle you have. So if you selected this unit for a Honda Accord, these male and male plugs here would look different, but the concept that I'm going to walk through is the same. So let's start by looking at this main harness. And at the very end of this harness, you'll see this large female plug. This has openings for 2 plugs. This is where your factory harness will plug directly into. So you're going to remove the plugs from the back of your head unit and plug them directly in here. It's here that this unit, this DSP gets things like power, but more importantly, the signal from all the channels in the stereo that'll power your speakers and the signal for your speakers. And then on the other hand here, you have matching plugs, right? So if you were actually to take these and plug them in, they would match. So you've unplugged your harness from your head unit. You've plugged them into this female side. right? Now you'll plug these two male plugs back into the head unit so that everything functions properly as if, this was never there. And now in the middle of this harness, you'll also see this plug here. So for those of you who are looking to add a subwoofer without replacing or amplifying your speakers, you're going to keep this connected to keep passing all the signal to your speakers untouched, basically. But for those of you like me who are adding a subwoofer and amplifying all of the new speakers that I'm going to install, you're actually going to disconnect this here, since your speaker signal wire will now come from your new amplifiers after you hook this up properly. So let me set this down. Then right here you have the brains of the unit. This is the actual DSP module, and this is where all the magic happens. You're actually going to plug this male unit from the main harness directly into the back of this module. This is what's going to send the unit all of the required signals and the power to the unit to be processed, configured via the application that I'll show you in a moment, and then ultimately output the process signal to your aftermarket amplifiers. I'll get into the app interface in a moment and show you how all this works. But this is the brains. Next, you've got your output harness. This takes the processed signal from your DSP and outputs it into RCAs that you see here that you'll ultimately use as your amplifier signal. Each of these are labeled. You have basically front left and right, rear left and right, and then you also have subwoofer signal out as well for powering either a monoblock or just a subwoofer in general. This is also where you'll find your amp turn on. Importantly, your amp turn on wire is right here. This plugs, so this will tell your amplifiers to turn on and off. This also plugs directly into the back of this DSP module. And then finally, importantly, Axxess has also included a subwoofer volume control knob here, so you can wire it wherever it's convenient in your vehicle, and then you'll just hook this into the wiring harness, and this actually will plug directly into your main harness here to tell this unit the signal or the volume control for your subwoofer. The colors and the wiring are pretty clear in the instructions, and you can always reference that when you go to wiring this unit. So at a high level, this is how this thing plugs in and works. Very straightforward. It's easy to understand, and if you need it, the instructions are also very clear and provide easy to follow steps and diagrams. You can also find it on the app that I'm about to show you. All right, so I've hooked up the unit to power on my test bench, and right out of the gate, I think it's worth noting that the only way you can connect to the unit now and power it up is if you power it up via the main harness. Once upon a time, they would let you hook it up to a USB via the mini USB on the side of the module itself, but a recent firmware update disabled that because they were having some issues with it. So now what you see in front of you, I'm using an Android unit. The Metra team will tell you to use an Android. The interface is maintained a little bit more. They focus on the Android interface a little bit more than iOS for some reason or another. I did get it to work on an iOS device on my iPhone, but just going back and forth between the user experience, the Android, and this is on a tablet, the Android app interface is a lot better than the iPhone. So I'm just going to breeze through some of the key features in the app here, show you what it's all about and what kind of control you have over the system. Starting with the configuration tab here, let's go to configuration. So this is where you're going to do a couple things like set your vehicle. You'll click here
on the vehicle type, and then you will select your year, make, and model. You can kind of see in the background mine is set to a Ford, a 21-22 Ford F-150. That's the vehicle that I'm going to be using with this interface right now. But you can go through and you can select it with any vehicle that is in the list of vehicles here. Go cancel. This is also where you can choose whether or not you want to do or use a graphic or parametric equalizer. Graphic is typically a little bit more consumer friendly, but you can also have a parametric if you would like as well. I'm going to leave that at graphic for now. Then you have the lockdown options below that, the three: lockdown, save config, recall config. Lockdown will essentially push all of your configurations from the device to the DSP module. You can also save your configuration to your tablet here, or recall it if you want to use this device to push it to another DSP module, for example. So let's move on to the outputs. So the output section is where you'll assign each output of your system to a specific location or set the signal type. For example, as you can see here, I have things like left front, right front, rear, left rear, right rear, subwoofer. You have a variety of options here that'll help you specify which output is what. This is also what's going to be used to determine if the channel is left, right, front, rear, right, things like balance and fader. That all comes from these types of configurations. So you can also use, and let me just pull up in the location, you can kind of see all the variety of locations that you can select if you wanted to use like a component, right, where you have left front tweeter that's separate from the front mid and so on and so forth. But on the right hand side, you can also group different channels. Let's say you're biamping a component, or you're just running dedicated amp channels for a component system. You have the tweeter separate from the mid, separate from the mid bass, and you want to run dedicated tweeters, and then you want to combine all those channel outputs into a single group. So you can basically dedicate a channel on the location on the left hand side, this 1, 2, 3, to the tweeter, the mid, and the mid bass, and then you can group them all here by using this grouping functionality. And what that'll do is that it will basically pass a front right or front left signal to all of those channels that you group it to. It'll send that same front right signal to them. It basically just indicates what the main speaker output or location is in that particular group. Since I don't have multiple speakers or outputs for a group, they're all the main. Then on the right, you have these two checkboxes. First, the invert, which is a nice little feature to allow you to invert the polarity of that channel. This is nice to be able to do on the fly. Let's say, for example, you're tuning or testing your system after your install and realize that the polarity on one of your speakers is flipped. Instead of having to go and either flip the RCAs or flip the polarity of the speaker output wire, you can come in here and you can just invert it and save it. So, and then similarly, if you're tuning your system and you want to tune one channel or speaker at a time, you can select this mute button here and turn off all of the channel outputs if you wanted, except for the one that you're tuning. Or if you just don't want to use a channel, you can mute it. Pretty nice little feature here. So next you have the crossover adjust tab here. And if I scroll up, so in the crossover section here, you can set the crossover and the frequency ranges for each of the channels that you assigned and set up in the output tab that I just went through. So each channel, you can select whether you want to use a low pass, band pass, high pass, and then you can select the slope. And then you can set the lower or upper frequencies or both in a band pass scenario for each of those channels. So this section is great for setting up and configuring each of the channels. And just to give you a quick example here, This left front channel will be sending signal to an amplifier that will be powering a Sony XS163ES. That's a component, a 6.5-inch component speaker. It's a three-way. I know that this speaker has an operating range, frequency range of 40 hertz to about 40,000 hertz roughly. So I'm going to set it to high pass so that I only pass high frequencies, and then 24 I'm just going to use for the slope. That's pretty standard. I'm just going to leave that for now. Rule of thumb is to double the lower frequency range threshold. That's the lower 40 hertz, especially for just an initial setup like this. So I went ahead and set it to 80 for now. And what this will do is lower the frequencies to a minimum of 80 hertz. It's not going to pass 40 hertz to these speakers and damage the speakers. And you can either do that by taking and adjusting this slider, or you can click on the number up on the top right corner. Oops, bear with me here, and set it here. Go click clear, set 80. Oops, I did 50, so I'm going to go click 80, enter, and done, right? And you can do this for each channel independently. You can see, I've got these kind of set up for the system that I'm going to be using. And then to the right of the crossover adjust tab, you have the equalizer. I mentioned this earlier. You can either choose a parametric or graphic EQ interface. I had the graphic selected, and that's what you see on the screen here. And on the AXDSPL unit, you have a total of 15 bands to adjust, and that's what you see here. And then on the X version, you get a total of 31 bands. So if you wanted the X, you wanted a little bit more control, you can get the X with that'll have 31 bands versus the 15. And so when you're tuning the system, you can set the gain on the very far left. You see here, set the gain for each of those output channels. But more importantly, you can change the level of each band of frequency, and each band is indicated down here on the bottom. So the far left would be, let's say, 0 to 19.999. The next would be 20 to 24.999, and so on. So I recommend letting a professional do this, or if you know how to use an RTA microphone with some tuning software. Setting the gain for each of these outputs is important to prevent clipping, and then it's also obviously important to set this up properly so that the sound of your system sounds it's set up properly. And then what's great to note about this feature is that you can obviously set each of and you can see this at the top, you can set the equalizer for each of the channels that you set up in the output channel. So when you set up and assign your outputs, keep that in mind, that you're going to be setting the equalizer for each of those channel outputs. And those outputs will be reflected here in the tabs up at the top that I just scrolled through. So you can tune each speaker or group of speakers that you'd like to have up on each of those channel outputs. So moving on to the delay adjust. So in this section, this is a pretty quick one. This is basically just for setting the focal point of the sound of your stereo. So you'll choose a spot in your vehicle that you want all of the sound to focus in and reach. You want the sound to reach that focal point at one point in time. So basically you'll take and you'll measure each speaker to that focal point. In most cases, you'll use the headrest area of the driver's seat, for example. That's setting it to you, right? So that all the sound reaches you at the same point in time. So you'll measure the distance from each of those speakers, each of those channels, to that focal point, and what that'll do is it'll delay, the unit will delay the signal so that all of those signals and the sound reaches that focal point at one point in time. And then you can see left front, right front. These again reflect the outputs that I set up in the output tab. And then finally, you have this input levels section here, and I'll just go through some of these real quick. Chime volume on the top is a big one for some particular vehicles, GMs and so on. This unit will automatically ingest the chime, and then it'll output it into the driver side front speaker at the level that you set here. So you can adjust that chime volume. Below this, you have clipping detection. This will basically identify clipping for each of the channels, and then it'll reduce the volume to prevent damaging your system and all the speakers and amplifiers and so on. If you set your gains properly, this shouldn't happen. But you could always turn this on just in case as sort of a fallback, just to protect your system a little bit more. Below that, you have amp turn on. This is kind of a nice one to have too. In the wiring harness of this unit, I kind of mentioned this earlier in the video, you have a remote amp turn on wire. It's the blue or blue and white wire. You'll wire that directly up to your amplifiers to tell your amp when to turn on. And you can either select always on, which basically means that when your vehicle is on, your amplifiers are going to be on too, regardless of whether or not your head unit is on. Or you can select the signal sense to tell the amplifiers to turn on when this DSP unit senses audio or anything in those signal inputs. This is nice to have this directly in the software and selectable. Finally, below the bottom, you have the subwoofer input here. This is an interesting one. Basically, if you wanted to either sum the front and rear channels for the subwoofer output channel, and obviously it'll go through those crossover adjustments, that you define in the crossover tab, or you can select the subwoofer, and that's pretty much for when your vehicle has a factory subwoofer. You can select to use that signal. I'm gonna select the front and rear here, and then I'm going to use the crossover adjust to set that upper limit of the low pass crossover, and that's the setup that I'm going to use. So that's all of the components here in the app. It's pretty much everything I wanted to showcase. I really like the fact that you can do all of this configuration and tuning that you would traditionally do between an amplifier or an inline DSP device directly from this module. And what's even nicer is that the wiring is super straightforward too. It's a very integrated unit. No snipping wires to get signal from factory speakers, finding an accessory for your amp turn on signal, etc., etc. You can plug this thing in, assign the various channels, configure them, and then send those outputs directly to your amplifier via RCAs. It's kind of an all-in-one solution. There's better DSPs on the market and DSP or tuning software for sure, if you're looking for a competitive system. But I would say that for probably 95% of the use cases here, where you want to either add a subwoofer, amplify your system with an aftermarket amplifier, or do a full system overhaul, this unit is going to do it well, and it's going to give you the flexibility to tune it how you want. So I'm excited to use this in my vehicle. So that's all I had for today. Thanks for tuning in, and if you like the content of this video, do us a huge favor and hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching.